Now, before we start, I want to make something very, very clear. I don't belong to NDC, I don't belong to NPP. This is just a documentary, and everything you're about to hear is based on publicly available information. Now, with that out of the way, let's begin. December 2024, 8 years away from the presidency, John Dramani Mahama is back. And not only did he just win, but he won by one of the biggest margins Ghana has ever seen in years. And his opponents had already called to congratulate him even before the Electoral Commission declared any official results. But here's what makes the story interesting, because 8 years earlier, many Ghanaians believed Mahama's political career was over. He had lost the presidency. Many people blamed him for economic hardship. Many people blamed him for doing so, and many people thought he was never going to return to the Jubilee House, and yet somehow he did. So how does someone go from losing the election to returning with one of the biggest political comebacks in Ghana's history? Was it simply because Ghanaians changed their mind, or was something much more bigger happening behind the scenes? That is what we are going to uncover in today's video. Before Mahama became one of the most talked about presidents in Ghana, he was just a young man from the Upper East region, born on November 29th, 1958 in Damongo, which is now known as the Savannah region of Ghana today. And you see, politics wasn't something that was exactly new to him, because his father, Emmanuel Adama Mahama, was one of Ghana's earliest politicians who even served under a member of parliament during the First Republic under Kwame Nkrumah. So he grew up seeing politics from the inside. Unlike most of us, they just see politics from the outside. He saw politics from the inside whilst growing up. But unlike many politicians, becoming a president wasn't something that happened overnight for Mahama. Before he entered national politics, he worked as a communications expert, a writer, and a historian. He studied in the University of Ghana and later moved to Moscow to continue his education, where he earned a postgraduate diploma in social psychology. And years later, he returned home with something that would become one of his biggest strengths. He knew how to communicate. In 1996, Mahama entered parliament as the member of parliament for Bole Bamboy. He later on went to win that seat again and again and again. And at this point, he had already become one of the most recognizable figures in the National Democratic Congress. You see where this is heading, right? Then in 2008, the NDC selected Professor John Evans Atamils as its presidential candidate and John Mahama as his running mate, and together they went on ahead to win the 2008 elections. And for the first time in his life, John Mahama became the vice president of Ghana. But then nobody knew everything was about to change, because in less than 4 years, an event happened that would change Ghana's political history forever. John Atamils was dead. Yes, sadly he died. And suddenly John Mahama wasn't the vice president anymore. He was now the president of the Republic of Ghana. But becoming president after the death of a current sitting president was only the beginning, because a few months later, Ghana went on ahead to vote again, because you see, Atamils died in the final year of his 4-year term in office as a president. So remember, I said he won the election in 2008. So 2009, 10, 11, 12. That's the 4 years, right? He died somewhere in the middle of that year, 2012. So that means Mahama took over and became the president for only a few months before it was time to vote again. So they voted, and lo and behold, John Mahama won. Yes, he won the elections, and this time around, not as a vice president, but as the main president to lead the country in his own right. And over the next 4 years, his presidency became one of the most debated in Ghana's recent history. You see, his government introduced like major infrastructure projects all across the country, but then those same years also marked some of the biggest challenges he faced as a president, because at that time the economy was just slowing down. A lot of people were complaining about rising cost of living, and Ghana went through a period of long power outages, which later became known as Doomso. And so it was just like that, one complaint after the other, until 2016, when it was time to vote. And when they voted this time around, Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo won the election, bringing Mahama's time as a president to an end. So Nana Akufo-Addo took over office, and for a while it looked like Ghana had moved on. There was a new government, a new president, and there was hope for the people, because after 4 years under Mahama, many Ghanaians believe this was the direction or the new change that Ghana needed. Then in early 2020, the world changed. Something tragic happened to the world that no world leader could have fully prepared for, because COVID-19 arrived. And it brought a lot of problems. Businesses shut down, borders shut down completely, and tourism almost disappeared overnight. People lost their jobs and governments started borrowing money left and right. And Ghana wasn't spared. Later that same year, Ghanaians went on ahead to vote again. Don't forget, I said Nana Akufo-Addo won the elections in 2016, so 17, 18, 19, 20. It was time to vote again, and when Ghanaians voted this time around again, Nana Akufo-Addo won the elections, and that means John Mahama lost for the second time. And at this point, many Ghanaians believe Mahama's political career was over. I mean, how much more worse could it get? He lost in 2016, he lost in 2020. But after the elections, life didn't simply become more easier or much more easier. You see, eventually the pandemic faded away, and yet many Ghanaians were still struggling. Food became more expensive, fuel became more expensive, the cedi kept losing its value, businesses found it harder and harder to survive, interest rates were high, and for many young people, finding a decent job became even more difficult. Now, many people disagreed on why all these problems were happening. Some people said it was mainly because of the COVID-19. Others pointed to global events like the war that was in Ukraine. I think it is currently still going on. And others simply said it was due to decisions made here at home that made things worse. But then whatever the actual reason was, one thing was very clear. People were getting frustrated, and when people become frustrated, they start to look backwards and they start making a lot of comparisons. The same Mahama many Ghanaians had voted against in 2016 and in 2020 was no longer being seen the same way again. Not because everybody suddenly forgot the past, but simply because of one simple question: would things have been different if someone else was in charge? And that simple question changed the whole conversation slowly, and that is where Mahama's comeback actually began. So gradually, time went by, and in 2024, it was time to vote again. And don't forget earlier that I said that Nana Akufo-Addo had won the election for the second time in 2020. So 21, 22, 23, 24, that is 4 years. It was time for Ghana to vote again. So quickly, voting day arrived and millions of Ghanaians went out there to vote. And when they began the counting, something was very clear quickly. Mahama's lead kept growing, and his biggest opponent, Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia, had already called to congratulate him on winning the election even before the Electoral Commission declared any final results. So yes, Mahama won the elections, and thereby completing one of the biggest political comebacks Ghana had ever seen. But here's the interesting part. You see, his victory wasn't simply just about a man winning or returning to office after 8 years of defeat. It revealed something much more bigger about people. It reflected how many people made decisions, especially when things became difficult. And that is what makes this story worth talking about. And now, after returning to office again, he has already introduced new policies and major changes, and supporters argue that some of those decisions are a sign that he's moving the country in the right directions. As a matter of fact, some people have even started talking about whether he should be allowed to serve a third term in case the constitution ever allows it. Now, my name is Remy, and if you enjoyed this documentary, please hit the subscribe button, and if you are feeling generous today, maybe just a little too generous, hit the like button as well, and leave below in the comment section who I should make the next documentary about. It could be a president, it could be a business leader, it could be anybody with an incredible story worth exploring. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.